Here are his stats, not counting his early season 9 throw appearance against the Chiefs. 69% completion percentage, 6 touchdowns, 1 pick, averaging 204 yards per game, 3 wins, no losses.
Does have a rushing touchdown too.
And has a rushing touchdown. So where's the hype on Brock Purdy? And is it right?
I got 2 picks.
2 picks for the season, 1 since he started.
Oh, got
since he took over in the Miami game.
Okay. I think everyone has to agree he has been dramatically better than anyone could have envisioned, beside maybe Kyle Shanahan, who told Tim Kawakami when he was the starter he'd never been so excited for a third rounder to play. And I think it's pretty clear if you read between the lines, just based on the actions back in training camp, that the coaching staff that ultimately decides on the fucking quarterback is the head man. So their love would be strong, but they clearly believed in the player, right? So anytime the franchise believes in the player, you kind of have to pay attention. Like, you don't play when you're a backup quarterback, right? Even if other starting quarterbacks go down, and several did, and it took multiple broken legs and broken feet for him to get in the game. But we all acknowledge, like, Kyle Shanahan likes this guy, right? So based on then, you'd go, well, I would guess he's probably pretty accurate and has a good understanding of his offense, something that Kyle values a lot. So from a intellectual standpoint, I never questioned, like, would he be able to run the offense, like call the plays and shit that can overwhelm young players. But once the play is called, he has just been much smoother, I would have ever imagined. He's a way better athlete than even based on like the 10-yard split and stuff we talked about. You just watch the eye test. He moves really well behind the line of scrimmage, right? Being able to juke out defenders, but yet being calm and under control, not being like jittery. His arm's not great, but I feel he's very comfortable playing with it. You know, and then this offense, I mean, it goes back to Matt Schaub. And hell, Mike McDaniel has talked about Matt Schaub when, like, talking about Tua. Like, these people don't speak about their offense. You just go around the league like they need Dan Marino slinging it around. Like that, wouldn't you say that's pretty, beside McVay, who I think always, like, probably had a little more like Andy Reid in him. Like, these other guys, part of LaFleur's deal was like, Aaron, just play within this. Run some of our plays. It'll help you. Like, they are huge. I would say Kyle, the LaFleur family, and clearly, I think Kevin O'Connell, who worked with McVay, who's, I wouldn't say is a big arm guy that played for Belichick, I think believes that. I think some of these guys think that, like, if you just kind of do what we say with our skill guys, and a lot of these teams have talented skill guys, you can have a lot of success. And I don't need peak Marino, peak Elway. I saw Jason Cole tweeted, like, if people want to know what Josh Allen looked like, type in John Elway highlights from the 80s. And I saw one. It kind of looked just like him, like flying around, throwing like darts. I was like, Jesus Christ. But they do not need that guy. And look what Mike Shanahan won 2 Super Bowls with. An old version of John Elway that was, 37. But when you see the pictures, he actually looks like 48-year-olds do now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which we always push back about, right? Like, that's why they wanted to move on from Jimmy to Trey. But I think this guy is a more explosive player than Jimmy Garoppolo. Now, does that mean he's going to be better? I just think he's more willing to call explosive plays, and this guy's more willing to pull the trigger on explosive plays.
Yeah, there is arm strength matters for not the throws I think that we think about when we talk about arm strength. I think arm strength matters for a lot of your throws outside the numbers in a different way than it matters for downfield throws. What matters for downfield throws is downfield accuracy as much as arm strength. And I think we don't talk about, are you an accurate deep ball thrower? Like, I think Jimmy Garoppolo is capable of throwing the ball down the field. Like, he can throw the ball far enough.
Isn't Tua a good example of that? Like, doesn't have a strong arm, but he does just throw a good looking deep ball when it's timed.
And I think Brock is Brock's not going to win any competition deep ball throwing. Like, you wouldn't pick him first to be your Hail Mary thrower. But I do think he's comfortable throwing the deep ball. Now, I've said a few times on the show, man, I wonder if Jimmy really was that explosive. And I went and looked the other day. His last year at Eastern Illinois, he threw for 5,000 yards, 53 touchdowns, and 9 picks. So they were pretty explosive. But for whatever reason, he is not an accurate. I don't know what the numbers. We could look at the deep ball numbers, but I think we've all watched Jimmy enough to say confidently he is not a very consistent deep ball thrower, and partly they don't do it a lot. Brock,
and you would say too, in 2014, a lot's changed in 8 years to get drafted that high from Eastern Illinois, Senior Bowl guy. Like, he was pretty well thought of, I would say, in NFL communities as like this guy's a chance to be a starting NFL quarterback.
Absolutely.
Jimmy Garoppolo.
Yep, absolutely. So I think that is one area when you compare to Jimmy so far, and I think this is when we talk about what's the hype around Brock. I think it's all anybody we're all trying to do. It's high. But all we're trying to do is figure out how much of this is really real and how much of it is small sample size. And I think there are a number of things that, if you believe that it's real, make you feel optimistic about him. And I think one of the things so far is that for a guy that doesn't have, he's not throwing the ball through a brick wall, it does feel like he knows how to throw the deep ball. Now, the Niners are not, to this point, a great match. They really don't have the downfield personnel, right? In the sense that you're not getting a lot of Ayuk beating a guy by a stride down the sideline and you're dropping it in the bucket. It's more somebody's getting schemed wide open and you're going to have to hit that throw, right? There's not a lot of like, all right, 50-50 ball, it's deep, just trust Debo to go make a play, in the same way that you see balls to Devontae. We haven't seen that yet.
Yeah.
Although any minute now, Danny Gray is going to get healthy and stay healthy for 4 quarters. But I think that's one thing that I wouldn't even say cautiously optimistic that you're optimistic about. The thing that you don't even have to be optimistic about that is real is his like around the line of scrimmage athleticism is good enough to make play, like good plus. I don't know what your scout scale would be. Is there if you were 1 to 10, how would you grade it?
Yeah, I mean, Kyler, Lamar, like elite athletes.
Is there a scale, like a number scale?
I think some teams have it. I'd say Jared Goff would be on in Kirk Cousins and guys like that are on the low end. I'd put this guy 5. If Lamar and Kyler are 10s, Russell Wilson, Seattle, like 8.5, 9, Deshaun Watson, right around there. And like Jared Goff and Matt Ryan, those type guys are like 2s. I'd put this guy like 5.5, definitely above like the average line.
Yeah.
And I'd say Jimmy, he's better than Jimmy, and Jimmy's probably 4.5, 5. Maybe this guy's closer to 6. But I also think he has some like, you can be faster than you actually are when you're an instinctive player. Like one thing for example, at one point in time in his career, it felt like, he's actually pretty comfortable in the pocket, avoiding shit and maybe it's injuries over time, but I feel Derek's kind of pocket quickness has gotten shittier because he hesitates. He doesn't, even though he's a good athlete, like his instincts aren't really there. And again, over time, we'll see if this guy ever takes a shot. I feel like his instincts are just pretty awesome. And some of that, to me, you're not like born, come out of the womb like this guy's got quarterback instincts. You develop in high school and in college. And I'd say most players in the history of the sport went, I was a 4-year starter at Stanford, at Texas, at whatever, and I got to build in the reps, right? Or 3-year starter back when it was harder to start as a freshman. This guy did get to a lot of football and just a lot of reps, a lot of practice reps with the A's, right? Against the number 1 defense on the team and against all the other teams in the conference. Like, that's just a lot of reps. It's the number 1 thing we talk about with Trey Lance is like, didn't get that many reps.
Yeah, I sent you this today. The video, there's like a 7-minute video on Twitter, which is incredible, that breaks down Tom Cruise. It's all this footage of Tom Cruise doing the
9.
most audacious stunt. 9 minutes.
It's 9.
This insane stunt where he rides a dirt bike off a cliff in wherever he is, Sweden or something. But it's not just a cliff. It's like the cliff is like it's got like walls on the side of the cliff. So he goes off this dirt bike and then releases the bike.
Turns into like a half pipe down the cliff almost.
Yeah, and then a free fall pulls the chute. They did it. It's he could die. You watch this and go, if you told me this is how Tom Cruise dies, it'd be very believable. He did the jumps. Not only did it once, he did it 6 times. In preparation for the stunt, this is for the Mission Impossible that's coming out next year.
Mission Impossible 18?
In 7. I think it's 7 or 8. in Norway. This is where it was. Norway. Somebody in the chat said. In preparation for the stunt, he did 500, whatever it's called, free jumps or whatever, out of a plane, which is a lot of gas. That one of the times they're like, we did 30 in one day. He just keeps flying up and jumping, just to get a better sense for how to work the parachute. And he did 13,000 jumps.
In fairness, he's not outspoken about carbon emissions. He's just trying to do a stunt.
He's just trying to make the. He said he did it for the audience, John, for the audience. And 13,000 jumps on a dirt bike, like all these different jumps. That's a lot of reps. Like a lot of reps in a real situation where if it goes wrong, you die. This is not. He didn't do it with VR goggles. He did 500 jumps out of an airplane and 13,000 dirt bike jumps. And even some of the dirt bike jumps that look kind of minor, it's like an 80-foot jump that he's making. It just doesn't look like much if you watch the video. So, when you drop back to pass as much as Brock Purdy's dropped back to pass, I think the question is just when you go from college to the NFL, no matter how many times you've done it, the guys are they are faster in the NFL and the Big 12. That's the part that I would say has impressed me the most, is that the skills that he's had from just his own body, one of the things one of the trainers in the Tom Cruise video says is like Tom's awareness is elite in terms of just knowing his body, just feeling his way as he jumps out of the helicopter, how to use, there's a camera guy behind him. He just had great awareness. Well, I mean, he's done this thing a million times. That's the thing with quarterbacks when they come in the NFL, you just don't know. That's the part that I think we can say pretty clearly that has translated for Brock. Like, I don't think we're waiting for an answer on that.
I wonder if he benefited from a lot of quarterbacks just get thrown in, right? Happened to Zach Wilson last year. It happened to Trevor Lawrence. Obviously, rightfully so. I mean, those guys were the first, second pick. Justin Fields, even though Andy Dalton got to start some games. Mac Jones, immediately the starter. And Mac Jones is a good example, right? He got to start at Alabama, but he also got to be the scout team guy for a couple of years against some of the best defensive players in the country. Brock Purdy for how many games, 8.5 games or whatever, 9 games, every single week was a scout team quarterback against. I saw Dante Hittner, our guy, said that this is the best defense in the history of the franchise. I just don't agree with that. But ultimately is one of the best defenses in the history of the franchise relative to that season, which is all that matters, right? Relative to that season, it's number one. Like some of those Harbaugh teams weren't technically number one. Seattle also existed. It's just I have a hard time. And I'm not diminishing anything away from this defense, but you just got to go against those guys. Bosa, Fred, Greenlaw, Jimmy Ward, Hufanga, obviously Tarvarius. Armstead hasn't even been practicing, but just the defensive linemen coming at your feet. And you're also, when you're against them, like it's not like Trent Williams is playing tackle for you, right? You got the backups and practice squad guys. Yeah. You got the dude, the Mexican dude is your tackle. That's the fact, though.
I saw a stat today from Football Outsiders that the Niners defense with a lead this year has allowed 6 touchdowns and has intercepted the ball 13 times and has 29 sacks and have only allowed a 61% completion rate. So yeah, I mean, he's played.
Well, I saw someone tweet like the Bucs got their ass kicked, and it was like Trey Wingo, or I don't even know who it was like, of course they did. Teams that play the 49ers the following week are 1-12.
Teams are say it again.
1-12 after they play the
Niners. That is a defensive, and it's a run game stat, right?
Which
beat somebody up.
I guess Seattle hasn't, maybe 1-11 because Seattle hasn't played yet.
I think 1-12 was the stat. Which would be
13. Was, but the Niners have played 13 games, but their 13th game was against Seattle, and Seattle, they just played that on Thursday, right? So how would they be 1-12? Wouldn't it be 1-11? Because you've only played 12 games after the fact because Seattle hasn't played after the fact yet. That game hasn't occurred. Are they factoring in Seattle's going to lose again?
Niners are 10-4.
Oh, you're right. Oh, so they have played. Okay, you're right. For some reason in my head, I had them 10-3.
Yeah.
You're right. My bad. Well, that number will be 1-13, I would imagine, because Seattle's going to play Kansas City in Kansas City.
Yeah, that's part of it. But this is part of sports. It's like, well, he's got really good players around him, right?
But no one's anointing this guy as like some future 10-year starter for the Niners, because you would be disingenuous. It's impossible to truly have that conversation based on such a small sample size. You almost have to live in the moment, but living in the moment, talking about this guy, it's not even just locally. I think a lot of people like this guy's blown people away.
So let me give you a line, and you tell me if this is too optimistic or not optimistic enough or just right. Goldilocks. Brock Purdy. They might have something here. Is that not optimistic enough, or is that exactly right?
I'd say that's approaching the threshold of as far as you're allowed to go right now.
Like, they might have something here. What if, they might have something here.
Yeah.
Can I say anything more bold than that and not be too hypey?
Yeah, like this guy's a lock opening day starter for them next year. I wouldn't even go that far. But he's definitely in the mix. This guy's a very good chance to be the 49ers quarterback in 2023.
Okay. How about this line? Trey's in trouble.
I think that's fair. How could you
Trey
not say that?
Might be in trouble is definitely fair, right?
Yeah.
Trey is in trouble.
He's in trouble right now.
Yeah. He's hurt, and this guy's winning games.
Yes. He was not in as much trouble with Jimmy even before the foot injury, just given Jimmy was Jimmy Garoppolo at the end of the day, right? Like, this guy is cheap.
They had already showed their hand with Jimmy. They want Trey to be their starter.
And there were variables about Jimmy. Jimmy was a free agent. They couldn't tag him. What the market was going to be, some desperate teams. Who knows? There were financial ramifications. Part of my idea to just pay the Hufungas and Greenlaws was just like they kind of get screwed for a couple of years. This guy is very, very cheap for the next. I mean, his signing bonus was what, 30? Would you say 30,000 or was it 77? Do you remember?
$77,000.
77,000. That the moment they drafted him, the 49ers, the only money they owed him was $77,000. They technically they can cut him tomorrow, guy.
He could buy a G-Wagon.
Can you imagine if John Lynch thought about cutting? Would they get into a physical altercation?
You mean if he tried to cut him because he was too threatening?
Yeah.
To Trey?
You just anyone in the building tried to cut Brock Purdy.
Kyle's like, all right, Trey's the starter, and then immediately Brock gets cut the next day. Like, whoa. Like, Kyle, I know you were going to go get him. Replace Trey week 2.
It's all, and this is what I'm talking about. NFL memes. This account on Twitter and Instagram is just a universal funny account. They just talk about whatever, like they're not biased in any case in terms of like who to use for their parodies.
They just try to hit what is like the big story, right? They just kind of are reflective of what everyone's talking about.
So ultimately the big story, they tweeted this after Argentina wins, right? So Messi's in there, and then it's easy to throw Jordan. And you could have, to me, Gretzky, Tiger, Muhammad Ali.
It's the goats of their sport is what this graphic.
There's 4 people in the boxes, and it's Messi, Michael Jordan, Wayne Gretzky, and number 13, Brock Purdy.
Well, that Tom Cruise video I mentioned, I saw it because I was scrolling Twitter, and Andy Liu from the Light Years Pod retweeted it, and I replied and said Jordan, Brady, Cruise, and Tiger. Like, I watched that video and thought Tom Cruise is one of the greatest competitors in like modern whatever Earth, right? And he replied, Brock Purdy, that the greats are actually Jordan, Brady, Tiger, Tom Cruise, and Brock Purdy. So you're right. I mean, he is one of the biggest stories in the NFL right now. I think that's safe to say. Yeah. I mean, if Mike White's one of the biggest stories, his team stinks.
Well, assuming he does not get injured, and Mike White has not been as good as Brock Purdy. If Brock Purdy stays healthy, which you can't assume the way the 49ers quarterbacks go, they drop like flies, he's going to start a home playoff game. A home playoff game. And the one thing in a playoff game, like ultimately this weekend, you and I will be locked in, and depending on where you live, but I would imagine the game of the week was Cowboys-Eagles. It is, because the Niners are playing at 2:05 this week.
Yeah, it's the national Fox. It's the big Fox game.
Yeah, which it should be. But every single human watches a playoff game, right? Just like the Saturday games, I would say the majority of sports fans in America watch some of the Saturday games at some point in time throughout the day. You just can't miss it. I'd say a lot of people just watch playoff games, like kind of start to finish. I mean, we do this for, what do you think? 75% of them all? Like Brock's, like, and chance, if it's Niners Giants, think how many people are going to watch that game.